I was wearing a gray janitor uniform the day my father told me to get out, not in private, but in the 41st floor boardroom with the city laid out like a trophy behind him, a dozen executives watching me like I'd tracked in dirt. I slid a thick folder across the table, memos, audio dates, names, and he didn't look at the evidence so much as the clothes, which pretty much explains how we got here. He said it again low and even get out, and for the first time in my life I didn't move. Rewind 6 months, and I'm still Lena Cole, the daughter with the MBA, and the polite smile who gets told numbers are just numbers to someone who's never worked a real day, you know what I mean. My father Graham could read 10 lines of a spreadsheet and spot a flaw at 30 paces, but he could also step over a person in uniform without seeing a human being. The CFO, a thin fox named Elliot Parrish, barged in to complain about noise at the Riverton plant. Overtime, safety, all the messy words that mean a real person is getting squeezed somewhere out of view. And my father waved him off with a "we'll handle it" that we never includes me. I left the office feeling like a lamp you forget to turn on drove past our name in 10-foot stainless letters and kept going until the skyline looked like a postcard. That's when I heard the Riverton night shift, clocking in boots on concrete vending machine hum, the soundtrack to a life I'd only ever seen in B-roll. A week later, I stopped trying to be heard where I wasn't invited and learned to listen where nobody looks. New name, new cadence, new pay stub. I became Nia Brooks, discount sneakers, hair tied back badge that said custodial, and HR slid me a rate that was barely more than my old coffee habit, 16.25 an hour, nights, Monday to Friday. First night the guard nodded toward the loading dock and said Marisol will show you the ropes, and that was the first good decision I made. Marisol Alvarez had been cleaning that building for 15 years and moved like someone who knew every camera blind spot, every shortcut, every person's best and worst day. There's a rhythm to cleaning that slows your thinking just enough to sharpen your eyes. People talk around you like the air. Jokes, complaints, secrets. And you learn where the real files live, not the glossy decks. In Elliot's trash, I found a memo about reclassifying overtime to minimize exposure, and in Operations Chief Nolan Briggs's in-tray, a handwritten note that said, "Channel plant complaints through Cheryl in HR. Keep Graham insulated." I photographed what I could put everything back, like I'd never been there, kept moving with a rag in my hand and a heartbeat in my throat. By week 2, Riverton felt like a living animal. Conveyors whining, forklifts beeping, the break room microwave coughing its last breath. And I ate my sandwich on an upside-down bucket with the second shift. Shauna from Quality Control told me about training her new supervisor, a guy with half her experience who somehow made 20 grand more. Raphael from Packaging joked darkly about volunteer overtime that wasn't exactly voluntary. Dee from Shipping showed me a cut on his knuckle and said the safety guard on line 3 had been on order for 8 months. It's amazing how often the word attitude means asked a fair question. One night I was dusting the far corner of the big conference room when Nolan and Elliot came in with a lawyer and Cheryl from HR. I kept moving slow, invisible the way you do when you've learned how not to exist. Nolan said the workforce optimization model could cut 30% without denting output. Elliot added older, higher-cost employees. First, we'll build a performance trail so it's clean. The lawyer asked about claims, and Cheryl said, "Flat as a weather report, troublemakers go in the first wave, we'll manage the optics." I gripped the shelf so my spray bottle wouldn't rattle because there's a special kind of cold that hits you when you hear people plan to erase lives with a pivot table. I took one more run at my father. Not the heir begging for a job, just a citizen asking a leader to walk the floor. And he said, "Your role is outward-facing, Lena, let managers manage." That door closed like a vault, so I tried the service elevator. Telling Marisol the truth felt like stepping off a roof. We were in the break room midnight, coffee sighing in the pot, and I said, "My name isn't Nia, it's Lena Cole." Her face didn't move at first, then the anger rose. Not loud, just steady. "Do you know what it sounds like when a rich girl says she wore our shoes for a minute to understand us?" I showed her the files, the recordings, the dates, and the anger didn't vanish, it focused. "If this is real," she said, "there are people you need to meet." We borrowed a room at the Riverton Community Center that smelled like pine sol, and old coffee sat in a rough circle. 10 workers who had earned the right to doubt everything I said. I told them all of it. Who I am, what I'd seen, why I did it. And Raphael called it betrayal. Dee asked if I'd ever done the math on $16 an hour plus rent. Shauna said, "This feels like a setup." Then Marisol told a story I didn't know. My grandfather, Samuel Cole, borrowed money from a union hall and 2 South Philly churches to start this company, promised jobs and apprenticeships, kept those promises until he died, and somewhere in the climb, the promises got buried under profit. That hit me like a freight train. I said, "If my family owes a debt, help me pay it back the right way. Stand with me, let's tell the truth where it hurts." We made a plan that sounds simple when you say it fast. Monday board meeting, service elevator, East Corridor, secondary checkpoint. Patricia had extra badges, we printed statements. I labeled exhibits in that heavy folder, like my life depended on it, because it kind of did. We met behind a delivery truck to dodge the lobby cameras, knees shaking. Marisol squeezed my hand and said, "Courage isn't the absence of fear, mija. It's holding the door open for yourself anyway." We walked in during Elliot's slide, about 30% reductions, and I set the folder down and said, "These are memos, emails, and audio documenting, wage theft, discrimination, and falsified performance trails to justify illegal terminations." And Shauna told them about training her boss, Raphael, about off-the-clock hours, Dee about missing safety guards, and Elliot tried to laugh it off as anecdotal, until I hit play on a recording with his voice saying, "Keep Graham insulated, manage the optics." You could feel the temperature drop. My father told me I was out of line, and I said I'm finally in the right room. Then security arrived and we were escorted to the elevator, and our phones buzzed with termination notices before we hit the lobby. On the sidewalk, drizzle turning everything extra cinematic and extra cruel, I said, "This is on me." And Marisol said, "No, we made our own choice. You gave us a chance to say our names in a room that loves numbers. Still, kids need shoes, pride doesn't buy groceries." Yeah, that happened. I called a reporter I'd met once at a charity dinner. Tessa Morgan, a woman who doesn't flinch when power leans hard, and we met at a diner with coffee mugs you could use as doorstops. She slid a recorder across the table and said, "You understand what happens if I run this. Scorched earth, no inheritance, no soft landing." And I told her about the promises in South Philly, and the cuts on Dee's hands, and the word replaceable in an email that still makes my jaw lock. She said 2 dangerous words if verified and went to work. 2 days later, I woke up on Marisol's couch to my phone going off like a fire alarm. Front page cable news business shows my janitor badge next to my headshot, like the world couldn't decide which person to believe. Dee got job leads before noon. Shauna heard from a union rep who'd been knocking on Riverton's door for a year. People we didn't know sent $20 donations to a GoFundMe. Patricia's cousin spun up. Then my father called. He asked me to come in, said he'd lifted the ban, and when I walked back into the boardroom, it looked smaller, like the room understood. It wasn't in charge anymore. Elliot resigned Nolan out, Cheryl on leave, Department of Labor, investigating lawsuits coming. My father rubbed his eyes and said, "Did I really not know?" And I told him the truth. When a system benefits you, it's easy not to notice who it's breaking. He said, "Help me fix it." I said I'd come back if it meant something real. Vice President of Worker Relations with authority to investigate and stop terminations. Direct line to him. My first hire would be Marisol as Deputy Reinstatement. For everyone fired for speaking up, back pay for stolen overtime. Audited by an outside firm, a worker-elected seat on the board. Union neutrality, a grievance process that doesn't end in a black hole, plain English policies you don't need a lawyer to read. He took a breath like someone about to jump into cold water and said yes. And we also rebuilt the promise my grandfather made. A foundation funded by a slice of profits for scholarships and apprenticeships in the neighborhoods that built this company with their hands. Months passed, and the changes that looked small on paper felt big in real life. New safety guards arrived and actually got bolted on the break room tables didn't wobble. We stopped punishing people for leaving early to pick up a sick kid. Shauna got the supervisor job she'd earned 3 times over. Raphael moved into maintenance with a real raise. The union vote wasn't close. Not everyone cheered. A couple directors grumbled about mission drift. Some investors bailed. My father still slips and says optics like the word doesn't burn. But when I walk the floor, people look me in the eye now, and Marisol laughs louder. And Henry, the guy who trained half the warehouse, shook my hand and said, "Took you a while, kid, but you got here. So here's your debate, because I know the comments will light up. Was I right to blow the whistle and risk blowing up my family? Or should I have tried another quiet back channel that probably would have gone nowhere? And how many Elliots or Nolans have you met in your own workplace, the folks who smile while they sharpen the knife? Tell me what justice looks like where you live, what you've seen behind closed doors, what a company owes the people who build it. If this hit home, hit like so it reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe if you want the next chapter, and drop your take below. I'll be in there reading every single one.